Hi and welcome. My name is Ryan O'Connell and I'll be your instructor in this training series, Set Up a Firewall in Azure. We're going to talk about what is an Azure firewall. We're going to set up a VNet for the firewall. We're going to deploy the firewall. We're going to configure some rules such as apps, DNS, routes, and of course we're going to test the firewall. So what is an Azure firewall? An Azure firewall is a managed cloud-based network security service that protects your Azure virtual network resources. It's a fully stateful firewall as a service with built-in high availability and unrestricted cloud scalability. You can centrally create, enforce, and log applications and network connectivity and policies across subscriptions and virtual networks. Azure Firewall uses a static public IP address for your virtual network resources, allowing outside firewalls to identify traffic originating from your virtual network. This service is fully integrated with Azure Monitoring for logging and analytics. There are two types of firewalls in Azure. We have the Azure Standard/Classic Firewall, which is what we will use in our lab. Azure Firewall Premium, still in preview, is the next generation firewall with the capabilities that are required for high sensitivity and regulated environments. These capabilities include TSL inspection, intrusion detection, URL filtering, and of course web categories. Firewall policies can be managed independently or with an Azure Firewall Manager. All new features are configurable via firewall policy only. A firewall policy associated with a single firewall has no charge, and currently the Firewall Premium SKU is not supported in secure hub deployments and forced tunneling configurations at this stage. So what is a stateful firewall? A stateful firewall is a firewall that monitors the full state of active network connections. This means that stateful firewalls are constantly analyzing the complete context of traffic and data packets seeking entry to a network rather than discrete traffic and data packets in isolation. There are three types of firewalls. We have packet filters, stateful inspection, and proxy server firewalls. In our case, Azure uses a stateful firewall, and that's what we're going to concentrate on. Again, Azure firewalls for production deployments, hub and spoke model is recommended, where the firewall is in its own VNet. In our lab, we will create two subnets. An Azure Firewall subnet. This is the firewall in this subnet. And of course, the workload SN, the workload server in this subnet. This is the subnet's network traffic that goes through the firewall. So in our lab, obviously, as you can see, we're going to have the Azure Firewall subnet. And of course, we're going to have another subnet, the workload SN, where our server is going to sit. We can allow Google through the firewall, and we will block Microsoft.com from the firewall. So if we go to our server and we browse to Google, we should be able to access Google. If we browse Microsoft, we should get an error saying it cannot open the Microsoft website. We can't browse Microsoft. Again, at the bottom are some useful links for finding out more about Azure Firewall. I suggest you take a note and go and look at these this link. It's really useful and it has a lot of good information available to you. Again, some Azure Firewall tips. There are many more. This is just a couple of them. You create a resource group for your firewall. Again, it's good practice to do that. You can use PowerShell to start and stop the firewall processes. Forced tunneling is supported when you create a new firewall. You cannot configure an existing firewall for support tunneling. The firewall VNet and the public IP address must all be in the same resource group. There is a limit of 50 characters for a firewall name. Azure Firewall blocks Active Directory by default. So to allow access, you need to configure the Azure Active Directory service tag, and then it will allow access. You must deploy an Azure Firewall with a public IP address. You can't deploy an Azure Firewall without a public IP address. The Azure Firewall uses a /26 address space. This ensures that the firewall has enough IP addresses for availability to accommodate scaling. So if you need to add another firewall and your firewall scales up and down, having this /26 address allows us to do this. So this gives you a basic overview of what we're going to do in this lab and hopefully a basic understanding of what an Azure Firewall is. So what we're going to do now is we're going to switch over into the Azure portal, and we're going to go ahead and set up this lab live, and hopefully you'll learn something. So let's log into the portal and get this done. Hi, as you can see, I've gone ahead and logged into the portal, and I've navigated to resource groups by clicking resource groups over here. We're going to go and add a resource group for our firewall. So I'm going to click the create button. I'm going to paste in my resource group, and remember the region, and I'm going to click review and create. And this is going to create our resource group. The next thing we want to do is we actually want to create our firewall VNet or VLAN. So I'm going to scoot over to virtual networks. We're going to click create, and I'm going to make sure I select my resource group, and I'm going to give it a name, and I'm going to click next, and I'm going to select the default IP address, which is 16, but I'm going to go ahead and modify this so that I can understand more of what it is, or better should I say. So I'm going to give it a name of Azure Firewall, and then I'm actually going to give it the /16 IP range, because this is what Microsoft recommend for scaling. So I'm going to paste that in there and click save, and I'm going to go and add another subnet for my virtual server. So the subnet we have just created is the firewall subnet. So I'm going to click add. I'm going to paste that name in there. I'm going to change that IP address name. I'm going to give it a /24, and I'm going to click add. So now we've got two VNets over here. I'm going to click review and create, and I'm going to click the create button, and this will go ahead and create those two VNets for us. Once these VNets have been created, we will go ahead and create a virtual machine, and we'll place that virtual machine in the workload -sn subnet. So this can take a bit of a while to set up. If you click this bell icon at the top here, this will tell you about your resources, what resources are in deployment and what resources have been deployed. So I'll dismiss all this, and I'll just navigate now to virtual machines. So I'll go to virtual machines. I will click add virtual machine, and then once I've added that virtual machine, we'll go and give it a name. I'm going to make sure that it's going to be in the firewall group, and then I'm going to give that virtual machine a name. So I'm going to call it server work. So we go ahead and paste that in there, and as you can see, it's we're in the same region. Again, I'm going to use a 2019 data center image. You could select whatever image you want. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a name. I'll call it AZ admin. I'm going to type in my password. And then I'm going to select the public under the import rules. I'm going to select none, and I'm going to go next, and I'm going to go next again. And under networking, I'm going to make sure that that my server is in the right resource group, and it is in the right VLAN, and the right subnet mask here. So for public IP, I'm just going to select none, and of course we'll leave everything at basic. I will go next. I will turn off boot diagnostics on this VM because we don't need that for this demo. I will click next, and I would click next and review and create, and this will go ahead and create that virtual machine for us, or should we say deploy that virtual machine. So once that virtual machine has been deployed, we will see it up here, and this can take anywhere from 2 minutes to 5, maybe 10 minutes for the machine to be deployed. And as you can see, it is in the process of being deployed, because it says deployment in progress over here. It also says it in here as well. So if we just give it a little bit of a while, it will complete the deployment, and then we can move through the lab. And as you can see, it's already starting to add our network security group, our interfaces, and other bits and pieces that are required in order for a virtual machine to run. So I'm just going to pause the video while this runs so that we don't waste time. And as you can see, the virtual machine has deployed, and we can see that through the notification area, but we can also see it through here. So the next thing we want to do is deploy our firewall. So I'm going to type in FIRE for firewall, and we're going to go and create a firewall. Now, this is something we need to make sure that the firewall is in the right resource group. Of course, we need to make sure it's in the right region, which is East US. And we need to give that firewall a name. So I'm going to go ahead and click paste my name in there, sorry. And again, this is something you need to be aware of. By default, it's going to use a firewall policy. And as you can see, we've got premium here. So we are going to select use firewall rules classic. So I'm going to do that. And of course, once you select that, you will see a whole lot of other things will start to happen. We're also going to use an existing virtual network. So I'm going to scroll down, and again, if we try to add a public IP, we can't, but we'll get to that. So I'm going to click in this top box here and select the firewall VN. And I'm going to add a new public IP address. So I'm going to go ahead and click add new, and I'm just going to call this FW public IP. And I'm going to click OK. And then I'm going to click review and create. And then I'm going to click the create button. And this is going to go ahead and create that firewall or deploy that firewall. So we need to just give it a few minutes to deploy. And as you can see here, it's getting ready to deploy. So we'll just pause the video while this happens. And as you can see, our firewall has been deployed successfully, and we can see that from here. I can dismiss that and close that down. So what we want to do is we want to go into our test firewall group. We actually want to go into our test firewall group, and then we actually want to select the test firewall at the bottom here. So once we've selected that, you'll notice we can see we've got all our different rules and stuff. If you had used the premium version, you would not see that classic rules there. It would be a policy. So what we want to do is we want to go into our, at the top here, and what we want to do is we want to type route tables. So if we type in route and type select route tables and click create, this is where we're going to go and create a route table, which we need. So I'm going to go ahead and select the firewall group, make sure it's in East US, and then of course I'm going to give this a name of firewall route. So I'll go ahead and just call that firewall route and click make sure we've got the right subscription, and of course review and create. And as you notice, I've got a warning here telling me that we have something to fix. So I've done this on purpose so that we can go ahead and fix this little issue. It says here the name must be less than 80 characters and start and end with a letter or a number. So I could call this, for example, let's say 01 firewall route, and click review and create, and this is going to create that route for us. And obviously we'll click create, and we'll just give it a while it creates it in the FW resource group. As you can see at the top here, always click the notification icon, it will tell you what's happening. I'm just going to pause the video while this does its thing. It goes ahead and creates. So I'll just pause it and get back to you shortly. And as you can see, it's finished deploying it. We can click resource and go to resource. And as you can see, we've got routes and subnets and our configuration settings all in here. So what I want to do is I now want to associate a subnet with it. So what we need to do is we need to click on subnets. we need to click associate, and then obviously from our subnets I want to use the test VN subnet, and of course I want to select the server workload subnet and click OK, and this will go ahead and add that subnet for us. So as you can see, that subnet has been successfully added. Again, we need to add another route. So I would go to routes, I would click add, and I'm going to type in a name of Firewall DG. So I'll just paste that bad boy in there, and of course I'm going to use an IP address suffix of 0.0.0/0 to allow all, and I'm just going to paste that in there, and I'm going to select here virtual appliance. It's important that you do that. Select virtual appliance. It's going to ask the next hop. Now this is where we need to make sure that we go and get our IP addresses for our firewall. So we need to go ahead and find out what those IP addresses are so that we can actually paste them in, because we'll need our private IP address of the firewall and the public IP address of the firewall. So what we could do is we could just go firewalls, we'll click OK, we'll come into our firewall here, and of course we can see here we've got our private IP address. So I'm just going to copy this private IP address, I'm just going to paste it into Notepad so that I've got it. And of course if we scroll through, we will go ahead now and find our public IP, because we've got our private IP address. So if I click on this here, this will tell me what my public IP address will be. So as you can see, I've clicked on it and there's my public IP address. So I'm just going to copy and I'm just going to paste this bad boy into Notepad so that I've got it. And now we are going to go back into our route tables, and that's quite easy. We just go to firewall, we can come back into our settings, and or we could just type in at the top here route tables. There's route tables there. As you can see, we've got our route table 01 there. So what we want to do is if we click on our route table here, we can then go into our subnets, and now we can go ahead and associate our subnets as we did before. So what I want to do now is go ahead into our routes, and we want to add that new route table. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paste in that name and that we had before. I'm going to use the IP of 0.0.0/0. I'm going to paste that in. I'm going to select virtual network appliance, and this is where I'm going to go and I'm going to paste in my private IP address for the firewall, not the public one, the private one. So I'm just going to grab my private IP address that I had in Notepad, and I'm going to paste that into there, and I'm going to click OK, and this is going to go ahead and add that route for us. Once that route has been added, we will go in and do some configuration to allow Google and to block Microsoft. So once that's created, what we can do is we can go to our firewalls by just selecting firewall there, go to our firewall group, and of course we select rules. And the first rule we want to add is an application rule to allow Google. So I'm going to click application rule, and we'll just give it a sec. I'm going to click add application rule. Now I'm going to go ahead and add that application rule. So I'm going to give that application rule of, say, appcol01. So I'm just going to copy and paste that bad boy into there. I'm going to give it a priority of 200. I'm going to say allow, and then I'm going to scroll down to the target FQDNs, and I'm going to paste in allow Google so I know what it is, and of course we're going to use IP address. I'm going to then go ahead and paste in my IP address of my LAN, so I'm going to just paste that into there. I'm going to tell it I want to use HTTP and HTTPS, so I'm going to go ahead and paste that bad boy in there. And I'm going to go ahead and paste in the Google's URL. And I'm going to paste that into there, and I'm going to click add. Now this is going to go ahead and add that application rule. Once that application rule is added, we can then go ahead and add a network rule. Okay, so that rule's completed. Let's go and add a network rule. I'm going to click add network rule. This is going to be a DNS rule. So I'm going to again give this a rule name. So I'll just paste that into there. I'm also going to give it a priority of 200. And of course, under the IP addresses rules, we are going to give that a name. So I'm going to say allow DNS because I'm going to add a custom DNS in there. So I'm going to paste that in. For DNS, I'm going to use UDP. For the IP address, I'm going to go ahead and type in that subnet or IP range that we created earlier for this for the source. And of course, for the destination address, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to paste in some DNS addresses that I have, and I'm going to do the destination port of 53 because that's DNS, and I'm going to click add. And this is going to go ahead and add that DNS rule for us. And as you can see, that firewall rule has been updated. I'm going to click NAT rules, add a NAT rule. I'm going to call this rule RDP. I'm going to also give it a priority of 200. And I'm going to give it a name here. And I'm going to select TCP/IP. For address space, I'm going to select a wildcard. For the destination address, this would be the public IP address of the firewall. Remember, I told you we need to copy and paste that in. So I'm going to go ahead and copy, and I'm going to go ahead and paste that destination address in there so that that address is in play. Again, destination ports, we are going to use 3389 for RDP. The translation address is going to be our server works private IP address. Now you're probably saying, where do we get that private IP address? We'd have to scoot over again to virtual machines because we want the VM's private address. So I'll come back to this. I just wanted to show you. So we'll come back into our server work, and there's that private IP address. So I'm just going to grab that private IP address. I'm just going to copy that into Notepad, and I'm going to save it there, and then I'm going to go back again into our firewall rules. So I'll go back into firewall rules, go back into firewall again, go into our classic rules and add that NAT rule. So I'm going to go ahead quickly and type in that NAT rule, which is RDP. We're going to give it a thing of 200. And I'm going to go ahead and give that rule a name. So I'm going to paste that name in there. I'm going to say it's TCP/IP address. TCP/IP. We're going to select IP address. I'm going to give it a wildcard. And of course, in the destination address, this is where we type in the server's private IP address. That IP address that we just copied and pasted from our virtual machine. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that in there. And I'm going to say port 3389, and I'm going to move over now where it's got the translation address in the in the translated address. Sorry, this would be the public the server's public IP address, my fault. So I'm going to go ahead and put in the translated address, which is our VM address, and I'm going to grab our server's public IP address that we had saved. So I'm just going to copy that public IP address from my server, and I'm just going to paste that bad boy into there, and we're going to allow that on port 3389, and I'm going to go ahead and click add, and that's now going to add that rule for us. This can take again a couple of seconds or a minute or two, so I'll just pause the video while this rule is being created. And as you can see, that rule has been created. So you can see we've got a network rule, an application rule, and a NAT rule. So what we need to do now is we need to go and modify some secondary DNS stuff. So what we want to do is I'm going to go back into my resource group. I'm going to select the firewall resource group, and in the firewall resource group, as soon as this populates, I'm going to go in here and add and modify some settings. So as you can see, it's modified some settings. So I'm going to click on the network interface card here in my server work. So we want to do that because that's in the virtual machine. If I click the virtual network here, this just takes me to the virtual machine. I don't want to do that. I actually want to change it here. So I'm going to click over here and I'm going to go down to DNS servers. I'm going to select custom, and I'm going to go ahead and add in a custom DNS server. So I'm going to paste that in, and I'm going to add another DNS server IP. So I'm going to go ahead, just copy that. I'm just going to paste that in, and that's going to then add those two DNS addresses. I'm going to click save, and this is going to save those DNS addresses. But what we need to do is we need to go in here and we need to restart our virtual machine. So once that interface change has completed, we will move over and restart our virtual machine. And as you can see, it's gone ahead and it's successfully completed all that. So I'm going to dismiss that, and now we're going to move over to our virtual machines. We can either go straight from here, or we can click virtual machines from here, select our virtual machine and select restart, say yes, and this is going to restart the virtual machine. We need to restart the virtual machine so that it can update those DNS records. Once that virtual machine has restarted, we can then RDP and test our firewall. And as you can see here, the virtual machine has started successfully. So what we want to do is we want to grab our public IP address of our firewall. So I'm just going to grab that. I'm going to say copy. I'm going to open up an RDP connection, and I'm going to go ahead and paste in that public IP address, and I'm going to go ahead and say connect, and this is going to connect to our server, and I'm going to be prompted for a username and password shortly. And as you can see, it's prompted me for my username, which was, so I'm going to go ahead and type that in, AZ admin, and I'm going to go ahead and type in my password and click OK. And this, sorry, I typed in my password wrong. And as you can see, I'm now prompted for a certificate warning. You can see it says server work, so I'm going to click yes, and this is going to now RDP straight into my server. So I'm just going to bring this over here so that we can see what's going on, and then we'll go ahead and test our firewall and see if our firewall is working. So we'll just wait a few minutes while the server fires up and does its thing, and then we can go ahead and do our thing. And I'm just going to close this down because we don't need this to show up. And I'm just going to go to local servers, and I'm just going to turn off security enhancement over here because we just don't need that at the moment. So I'll just turn that off because that's not going to do us any harm. And I'm going to click OK, and then I'm going to close this down. So the first thing I want to do is I want to grab a URL for Google. So I'm going to say copy. I'm going to open up Internet Explorer, and I'm going to go ahead and paste that Google range in there, that Google address, sorry. So let's see if we can get to Google, and we'll just give it a second, and yes we can. And if I said MS, we can see we can actually browse Google. So this is fantastic. Our firewall is working. But let's be 100% sure. Let's say we wanted to go to Microsoft.com. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete that URL and paste in Microsoft.com and press enter. And as you can see, Microsoft.com is not allowing us to access that website. The firewall is blocking Microsoft.com. So hopefully this gets you up and running with how to use a firewall. There's a lot more that you can do. This is just some basics, and hopefully just following this lab you can work through and get your head around practicing with the firewall, creating firewalls, deleting firewalls. Another thing that I want you to be aware of is, let's say we've finished our lab. This virtual machine is still running, and while it's running we're actually paying for it. So what you can do is you can click stop. This will stop that virtual machine. But also what you can do as well, let's say for example you don't want to use those resources anymore, you want to actually create the firewall fresh again from the lab or the steps that I've given you. We can do that, and as you can see, we'll just wait for this virtual machine to stop. Once this virtual machine has stopped, I'll open up PowerShell and I'll show you how to remove or clean up those resources so that you're not having to pay for those resources, or you're not struggling to remove them. And just a quick one, while we're waiting for that to remove, I'm just going to navigate back to Firewall and just show you a few things that you can do with the firewall. Again, we've got all our different rules. We can use Firewall Manager. We've got threat intelligence. We've got some properties. We can locks. We can also do metrics and diagnostics. We can log stuff. So there's quite a few things we can do that's beyond this scope of this lab, but this is just getting you an idea of the things that we can do. We can manage our firewall, we can create policies from here, we can set up threat intelligence if we wanted to deny or allow alerts, or we can actually turn it off. We can have a look at some public IP configurations by clicking that. That gives us our public PIP that we created, that we remote desktoped into our server with. Again, we can do tags. We've got all our DNS settings here. Again, we can go to properties here and we can modify and change stuff, copy and paste this if we wanted to create a JSON deployment file. So there's a lot of things that we can do. So again, coming into the notification, we can see our virtual machine has stopped. So what we want to do is we want to actually go back to our resource groups and we want to delete this resource group, delete everything in it so that we have a clean slate to start off with, and we're not being charged for anything. So I'm going to fire up PowerShell. I find PowerShell is the best way to delete stuff because it really does do a nice job of deleting and cleaning up those resources. So we'll just give it a second while PowerShell fires up, and then I'm just going to grab a command that I've written into Notepad and paste it in. So I'm just going to click on there and I'm going to paste that command in there and press enter, and this is going to go ahead and delete the resource group. And if you notice, I've used the minus force, and that's going to force the removal of that resource group, and that can take a bit of time, so I'll pause the video while that's happening. And as you can see, PowerShell has finished running that, cleaning up that resource. So I'm just going to close this window down and I'm going to give it a second and we'll refresh. And as you can see, by clicking refresh, we have cleaned up that resource. So I hope you've learned a lot. Sorry this video has been a little bit long, but I wanted to show you the step-by-step process. So if you've never ever set up an Azure firewall, you can do this from the ground up, and you did it in less than 30 minutes. So well done. Thank you for viewing, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. And please subscribe. Thanks again. Bye.